I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Paranormal Fireside Chat with the Naked Bigfoot. Yeah, I'm pretty much gonna stick to that title for a while until something else comes along. Just something I pulled out of my ass that sounds kind of classy. So, before we begin tonight's tale, I have to, of course, go over the warnings. First of all, opinions, um, insinuations, exclamations, um, accusations are exclusively the Naked Bigfoot's own. My show is both a combination of entertainment and information. I'm not here to change your mind. I am not here to change your religion. I am not here to offend. I am here merely to educate and entertain. Um, Also, if there are any small kids in the room, uh, viewer discretion is advised. You and the children will most likely hear the word fuck used frequently, um, and several other foul bits of language throughout the show. It's not because I enjoy saying the words, it's fuck it, I do enjoy saying the words. So if you don't want your kids to pick up some new foul language, please send them out of the room. If you're easily offended by descriptions of paranormal occurrences, foul language, um, then this may not be the show for you. Hey, Papa Joey, thanks for good seeing you tonight. It's so nice seeing you tonight. I know you've been on the road, from what I understand, um, going through Texas. Oh, one more thing. Something that started early with my shows that it's a tradition that I wish to continue through all my shows. It's a drinking game, if you haven't heard already. Every time you hear me say the phrase, and that's a story for another day, please take a sip of your adult beverage or your non alcoholic beverage of choice. I must warn you, though, that the Naked Bigfoot does not encourage drinking and driving. So by the end of tonight's tale, you may be incredibly drunk, which means you are not allowed to drive. You must find a place to lay down and go to sleep. And sleep it off. Because I will be using that phrase frequently and often. And I have to thank my he's the one that first pointed out. And he was really nice about it. But he was the first to point out, because I hadn't realized I was doing it. But he was the first one to point out that I said that a lot during conversations that I had online, during interviews or stories that I told on my stream. So, um, and then I went back and watched a couple of the episodes that I had done, and fuck, he was right. I said it a lot. So I decided to turn it into a drinking game just for shits and giggles. Oh, fuck. Ooh, that almost came out. Alrighty, on with tonight's tale. Well, as you may well know, tonight show I entitled Mountain Spirits of the Appalachia. Um, I realized after I typed it that that was a bit of redundancy, because the Appalachia, of course, they are mountains. So if you're talking about spirits of the Appalachia, you are talking about mountain spirits in general. And I didn't go back and change it because I thought it just sounded really cool. So I said, fuck it. I left it the way it was. As I was putting my thoughts together for the show and going through some of my journals for getting ready for tonight's episode, um, God, it's fucking hot in here, and I got the AC on, but it's still burning up hot in this room. Fuck, I am sweating balls in here. It is not cool. Hold on. Dramatic pause. I gotta get one of my remote controls out. I got a remote control for absolutely everything in the room, so I don't have to move my ass. There we go. I got a fan pointing on me now. I feel better. Everything's wired up to remote control, so I don't have to move if I don't want to, which is really cool. Okay. So if you hear some weird buzzing in the background, that's this big ass fan that I just hit the remote control and had it maneuver itself to the edge of the bed and point up at me, so it's blowing up between my legs and up towards my face because I am fucking hot. Okay, that's enough bitching for right now about the temperature in the house right now. Hopefully nobody's outside trying to burn the house down right now or anything, so which would not be cool at all. Okay, back to mountain spirits of the Appalachia. When I was going through my journals and my notes about the various shit that I'd collected story wise, and the various encounters I had while growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, because if for those who don't know, your humble and noble naked Bigfoot is a child of the Appalachian Mountains, born and bred. And forcefully removed by his parents to have to join civilization far from the mountains, but that's a story for another day. I was debating on what spirits to talk about. Would I be talking about the inherent natural spirits that exist in the mountains themselves? I'm talking about unhuman and non-human spirits, elementals. We're not talking about, not discussing cryptids, talking about cryptids in general. Oh, that's right. I know I missed out on Parapalooza. I was not, I was less than 50% than what I should have been. And I'm sorry for having to bail out on that. It's rather sad that that happened. I really enjoy, and just to let everybody know that what I'm referring to is a comment that was just posted by Papa Joey, Papa Joey. I want to let everybody know. Just pause for a quick second before I continue, and say that the truth about beer and that group, the Suds team, that includes Keith, Papa, and others, and over on their YouTube channel. They're amazing guys and gals over there. And I started watching, a couple of years ago, I started watching their videos. And they introduced themselves through Twitter, met originally on Twitter with them. And they invited me on their show to talk about Bigfoot. and and then it went from there. And they actually, I had been up to the point before meeting them, I had been debating on whether or not I was going to start sharing my life with the world, because I had settled down here on this farm. Hey, Christine. I had settled down on my farm had my family going good. Um, my life was not as adventurous as it used to be, aside from my encounters with the hairy bastards that live in my woods. My life was not as exciting anymore as it used to be. And I felt that if I faded from this world, that there would be people I would like people to know the wonders of the things I had seen. But I'm not a shrinking violet or very shy. And I really don't care about other people's opinions for the most part, unless it's something that's deeply personal nature, and then I get rather rabid about that. But when it came to my life and dealing with the paranormal for all these years, um, I saw their invitation to when they interviewed me. And we did it originally by phone. It wasn't a video interview at first. They did it by phone, so you just heard my squeaky voice coming out as they were asking me questions and listening. Um, when they brought me on their show, I had a fuck it moment and said, you know what? I'm just gonna start, explaining to everybody about. I'm just gonna let it all out. Everything I'd ever encountered, everything that I do. I'm gonna just start letting it out and letting people know. Um, I wanted to have my Fox Mulder moment. I wanted to reveal the truth to the world, as it happened in my world. Hey, Drew, welcome on. Um, but I like to, if it wasn't for that original chance encounter with the guys and gals over at the Truth About Beer, um, on Twitter and then on YouTube, there's a good chance that this site, that what I do now would not be happening. My book would have never been written. That my tales would have only been told by my children and passed along by my children to my grandchildren, to my great grandchildren, so on and so forth. And I would never have the platform that I have now to share um, the wonders that I have seen uh, with the world. So I just want to take a moment to thank everybody over there for that. Those guys opened the doors for me, and I am eternally grateful to them for doing so. I've had a lot of fun with those guys too. I've had a blast with those guys. We've laughed so much. On occasion, we've cried. Well, I should say I've cried. Um, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I learned a lot from them, and dazzled them with a lot of stuff out of my mouth with them. Um, they're just amazing guys. So if you guys don't follow them, um, you're really missing out on something great. Okay. I went on and on and on about this love fest right now. I should just do a. You brought me. That's a good point, Papa Joey. Papa Joey brought me out of the paranormal closet. They popped my paranormal cherry. There, I made it vulgar. Are you happy now? Uh, that was good. That was good. Okay, now I'm gonna need to get back on topic again. I'm straying too far, of course, as usual tonight. But those of you who have watched any of my videos in the past or have seen interviews with me know that I have a habit of straying off the course of the conversation, and I have a way of um, I have a way of I'm not going to say dominating a conversation, but like I said, I've never been a shrinking violet, but now that I'm my paranormal cherry has been popped and I'm out of the supernatural closet. Um, I am more vociferous than ever about it. And I share my opinion often and frequently, usually whether it's asked for or not. But I always do so in a respectful manner, and I argue the paranormal and the supernatural and the preternatural in a respectful manner. I respect everyone's opinion, whether they're completely wrong or not. I still respect it. And I never want anybody to go away thinking that I hate their guts or they go away hating my guts. I want them to go away. We may not be friends, but at least we can uh, have a mutual civility between us about opinions on certain subjects and can still get together to have healthy debates. One day I'll have to tell you about a debate I had with a guy that I met on Twitter who is a huge Wendigo fan who I got into a lively debate with him about the origins and what a true Wendigo looks like and appears as. And oh God, it went on for days. The argument did, and we're still good. We're so good. We're so cordial to each other, but it got heated for a while there. But that's a story for another day. Okay, back to the mountain spirits of the Appalachia. As I was said earlier, before I got off on my little weepy tangent, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to talk more about the non-human or the unhuman spirits that exist in the forests and the hillsides of the Appalachian Mountains, or if I wanted to talk about the once human spirits that dwell there. So I think I'm going to probably do a little bit of both. And I'm probably going to start talking tonight about the once human spirits, which we're going to refer to as ghosts. I never liked that term. It's used to describe a lot of things that are not truly ghosts nowadays. It's a throwaway term now. That it's like biting down on a shitty candy bar or something every time I say it. That's why I relegated myself to saying thing, referring to spirits as once human, ghosts as once human spirits instead of ghosts, because I think when you refer to them as once human spirits, people automatically know that what I'm talking about is a ghostly figure. So, as opposed to saying ghost, which people use the word ghost interchangeably with unhuman, non-human, and God's help it. Even they use it when they're talking about demonic and dark forces. Ooh. So that term's fallen out of favor with me a great deal. But I'll use it tonight for the sake of expediency. So everybody will understand where I'm coming from. If everybody's cool with that. God, that wind feels so good from that fan. Okay. Let me start out by explaining to everybody. Now, for those who are not familiar with the Appalachian Mountains, whether they're from another country or a different part of the United States, Appalachian Mountains are the largest chain of mountains on the east coast of the United States. Runs all the way up from the Appalachia, runs all the way up from around the Georgia area, all the way up past West Virginia. It's a long chain of mountains. Where I lived at, where I grew up at, was a part of the mountain chain that was known as the Blue Ridge Mountains. I live in a town called Blue Ridge, Virginia, which is nestled beside the Blue Ridge Mountains, but that's not where I was raised at, not where I was born and raised. We have a county called here in Virginia. It's called Wythe County, near Wise County as well, which were coal mining counties here because they were up against the mountains heading towards Tennessee, on the Tennessee side of the mountains that separated Tennessee from Virginia. That was the mountains, not the counties, but that was the mountain chain, that part of the mountain chain between Tennessee and Wise and Wythe counties, that I was born and raised in. It was very wild, very rugged mountains. We were completely cut off from what people call civilization, and they still are. If you go there, and I've gone back and visited there on occasion, very little has changed from the folk up there. More suspicious of people they don't recognize when they come there. But a lot of their traditions are the same. And the traditions that I had, and they still have in that part of the mountains, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, were their burial rites. And this is important to understand. So when we start talking about ghosts tonight, you'll understand why this is important. Our burial rites are important. We couldn't afford. I shouldn't say we couldn't afford. Uh, yeah, I will say that we didn't bury our dead in fancy caskets. It was usually, if anything, uh, if you had, a good woodworker in the family, or a friend who was a good woodworker, they would build you a simple coffin or a simple box to put your body in, um, and display you for a number of days at the home when you died in that box or in the bed, in your family bed. They display you in the bed, dressed up, ready for burial. As my great granddaddy Jess was. He was not displayed before he was buried in the box. He was in his bedroom, on his bed, in his bed, like he was sleeping with his hands across his chest. We did not embalm the bodies. Um, we did not build vaults into the ground in which to place the bodies. We did not have big stone headstones carved that were placed on them. Burial rites were uh, incredibly simple, incredibly simplistic. Um, when civilization peeked its head into our community, they actually gave us special dispensation because there's a lot of communities where you cannot bury a body unless it's embalmed and it's surrounded by and that the body is vaulted. But it's impractical when you're burying somebody in a family cemetery on the side of a mountain to embalm a body, but you would have to take it to a town to do that at and find somebody to do it and then bring it back up the side of the mountain to bury it. Um, and it was impractical to try to build a vault into the ground in which to place the box or the wrapped body, because again, if you had no one in the family that could build you a coffin, but it was always called it was always called a box. We were buried in boxes. I used to joke, it was like, later on I told my kids, it was like we were all when our family's like goldfish. When they died, I put them in a box, and a shoebox, and put them in the ground. That was always a joke I told them, which they never thought was funny. And they grew up with the trappings of civilization, so they didn't quite understand. They thought it was backwards and primitive, the way my family conducted their burial rites. And they usually had stones placed, local stones. When they dug, they kept the stones, and the stones were put on top of the soil where the body was placed into the ground at, to build up a mound around where the body was buried at. Um, and that was done for a reason. We did not have pastors and priests or anybody of any type of mainstream faith that conduct any services up there. It was usually members of the family and friends that would come in to say a few words about the person, grieve with the rest of the family, and then bury them. But the one thing that was always one thing that was always expected by the family members when you went in to view the body is that you would bring in a sprig of either hawthorn, a sprig of mountain laurel, or a sprig of, oh shit, what is that called? Witch hazel, or a sprig of witch hazel. And those would be placed on the body in the home or in the box, and they would be buried with the body at the time. You're wondering, why would you do that? Well, these particular woods, these particular types of vegetation, um, They were put in there to keep the body in place, to keep the spirit from. They were there to keep the body staked in place, that the spirit wouldn't rise and get lost and wander. Um, the reason why we put the stones on top of where the bodies were buried was the same reason. It was to keep the bodies, to keep the spirits from the bodies, the ghosts from rising and walking. I'm not saying that kept it from happening, because it did happen. We did have ghosts of family members and of distant family members who would rise from their graves, um, but they would never wander far. And my great granny, who I always would call her great granny Voodoo, people have always heard me call her that. She was a local witch woman on the mountainside, greatly feared and greatly respected. When I call her the witch woman, she was a combination of a doctor. Um, she was midwife, medical doctor, everything rolled into one, with a mixture of mountain spiritualism, with practical knowledge in herbology. She taught me so much, so very much, especially when it came to proper funeral rites for our dead. Okay. One thing you'll see too is that you'll never see the family cemeteries, and family cemeteries were meant for family. They were not meant for outsiders. Nobody who was not a member of your family was ever buried in their cemetery whatsoever. It just wasn't done. It was improper to do that. Never was explained to me why, but grew up being told that it was improper to bury somebody from another family with somebody in the same in your family cemetery. They had to be married into the family or be of blood relation to go there. We never had fences per se, um, around the family cemeteries, but instead we had a mixture of stones that were placed around the cemetery, that were placed around the burial site, um, and logs, stones and logs, and the logs were anywhere from oak to pine, again of mountain laurel, you name it. But it was always a fence around it of some sort, it was a clear, you could see clearly that there was something there when you walked up on it, and when you walked past that little square of stones and logs, you could see the where the grave site was at. Okay. I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm sorry. Um, One of the other reasons, as my grandmother explained to me too, was to this having building, and this holds true for a lot of cemeteries out there, by the way. Modern cemeteries that are so steeped in traditions of walls. A lot of modern cemeteries have walls around them. And as my grandmother taught me about the walls around our family cemeteries, walls are placed around a cemetery not to keep people out, like vandals and thieves. They were placed around cemeteries to keep things in, for the most part, to keep things from rising and wandering away. Um, if they did rise and they did step outside the house, outside of it, they could come back, because the walls were, in a sense, a house that was built for them, that they could come back to and rest in their bed in the ground. That's how I was taught about what walls were around cemeteries, and why boundaries had to be placed around cemeteries to create a house of the dead that the dead can come back to and rest in when the sun came up. That's what my granny told me. You may or may not have heard that. um, but let's move on to a good ghost story. Um, okay. One of the most interesting ghosts that we had on the mountainside, which scared the piss out of everybody, um, was the story of, oh God, what was her name? It fucking left my head. I'm sorry. It just went right out of my fucking head. I think her name was Helen. We're going to call her Helen. If it changes, I'll put something in the description to tell you if I remember if that was not her name. Um, Apparently, Helen, her house caught on fire on the side of the hills near one of the old coal mines. Her house caught on fire one night. She was able to get out, but her child, which was a little girl, burned up in the fire. Um, and they never found the body. They figured it was reduced to ashes. And Helen, in her grief, um, went to I think it's called Piney Creek. Went to Piney Creek Bridge. I know there's Piney Creek Bridge. And she hung herself on Piney Creek Bridge. And her spirit, she was taken down, of course, and buried. But her spirit had already left her body, obviously. And it haunted Piney Creek Bridge. How did she haunt Piney Creek Bridge, you may ask? Um, Growing up, we heard the story. So naturally, we being smart-ass teenagers that we were, we would want to go out to try to find her ghost. And we were always told by our parents and grandparents that if you go there and you bother her while she's crying on the bridge for the loss of her child, if you disturb her, she'll make it to where you'll never be able to find your way home. That you'll wander the sides of the mountains, never finding your way home until you die, and then your spirit will be left wandering the woods forever, never finding its way home. So, of course, we want to go we want to go meet this ghost. um, so me and some cousins, because of course I grew up being the instigator. I'd always, triple dog dare my cousins, because I was an only child. So I had cousins, lots of cousins, to go to the bridge one night. And it was a Friday night. And we'd snuck into great grandpa Jess's his stash of apple brandy. And we wanted to go out there and drink it and see if we could spot Helen at Piney Creek Bridge. It was about It was almost it was a little bit over an hour's walk away from our house to Piney Creek Bridge through the woods and on the side of the mountain. And let me tell you what, you really don't know how dark is until you're walking on the side of a mountain in the middle of the night, around midnight. Um, no discernible trail whatsoever. If you don't have anybody with you, it is absolutely terrifying because the woods are fucking alive around you. You start to hear sounds that you've never heard before when you're going through the woods, or think you've never heard before. And I literally pissed myself twice when a couple of hoot owls went off in the tree beside us when we were going through there, and I jumped straight up in the air when it happened. Scared the ever living shit out of me. So every time we got scared, we took a sip of apple brandy. Homemade apple brandy too, by the way. That's the best shit ever. Best medicine, on the mountain medicine you could ever have too. So we made it to Piney Creek Bridge. It was probably around midnight, closer probably to 1 o'clock in the morning when we got there. We took out some old kerosene-powered railroad lanterns that our families had and always kept around, filled with kerosene in case something happened. They needed to go in the woods, go find some dumbass who got lost or something. And we lit them up, and we went out and the Piney Creek Bridge was a covered bridge, by the way. It was a covered bridge. And Piney Creek was fucking huge. I mean, it was just rapids. If anybody ever goes and sees the rapids of West Virginia, we're talking about that level of rapids. The water's insane. Or Colorado River rapids. The rapids are insane that come off the side of that mountain that make up Piney Creek. So you hear the water way before you see the water. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we walk out after we dared each other back and forth, um, to walk out onto Piney Creek Bridge to see if we could hear her or see her. Now, we were told the trick is you had to call Helen for her to pay attention to you. You had to call her by her name. Um, and go out to, hey, Helen, Helen, Helen. And just keep calling her name until you heard her cries or heard her answer you. And me being the smartass that I was, we were double dog daring and triple dog daring on who was going to go into that covered bridge first and do it. And of course, it ended up being my dumbass who went up there, followed closely by three of my cousins. And we went over to Piney Creek Bridge. And I started yelling, hey, Helen, Helen, where are you, Helen? Helen, I said, I found your daughter, Helen. Which I know now that was really a really stupid and bad fucking thing to say. But I was a kid and drunk and full of shit and wanted to show off in front of my cousins. So I asked, I told her I found your kid. And it got really, really quiet. Like I said, the woods and the mountains are fucking alive. It's palpable, the sounds of the mountains between the crickets and the owls. And you could hear, if you never heard a fox yip at night, it'll scare the shit out of you too. Snakes, rattlesnakes, anything. You'd hear them all in the woods. Things running around the woods, rabbits running around in the woods at night. But it got really, really quiet as soon as I said, I found your daughter, Helen. Hey, Helen, I found your daughter. And I could hear the water. The only sound we could hear, of course, was the water of the Piney Creek that was running underneath it. And I swear against everything that I could hear this just, oh, I got goosebumps thinking about it. Gut-wrenching sob. And followed by, I just whispering. I just heard somebody say, it's quiet, lilting voice, my baby. And then I just heard the sob, this choking sob one more time. And I heard my cousin Charlie. He said, oh, fuck. We need to get out of here. And they fucking took out of there so fucking fast. They left my ass standing there, of course, literally holding the lantern, looking, and they ran back across that bridge and through the damn woods and left my dumb ass sitting there on the creek with apparently a sobbing ghost inside the covered bridge where I was standing at. And I had the lantern going back and forth looking to see if I could see her after that last sob, that little sobbing wail she did before it just died off, holding it up to the rafters, you name it. Now, for those who don't know, railroad lanterns had pieces of colored glass on four sides of them. Two sides were green, two sides were red. They were used by railroad men back in the day, many, 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 many years ago. While people were working at night, they would hold up the lantern, green meaning there's a train coming, red meaning red meaning the train was coming, green meaning that it was safe to walk the tracks. They used them mainly when people had to go across old railroad bridges and stuff, and people would be on the lookout. And they would use the lantern to signal people on the bridge when the train was coming or when it was safe to cross. It had a lot of uses. That's what it was mainly used for. I think I still have a couple of them left in one of my millions of storage spots. But that's a story for another day. Again, I had it turned to where the red side was facing the flame inside of it, so it was casting this red light everywhere and made everything look drenched in blood. I was looking around, so that was incredibly stupid of me to do because it scared my dumb ass even more when it happened. Um, and I heard, before I turned around and ran, I heard one last word that was spoken. It was leave. And I fucking turned around and I left. I ran my ass off that bridge as fast as I could, and I didn't look back. Now, it took about a month before I ended up telling my granny what had happened. And she called me everything but a child of God and said that was quite possibly the stupidest thing I had ever done. She said because that ghost out there was dangerous. And that ghost would take you and never let you go. She was furious with me that I went up there and did that. Mainly because she was so scared that she said she almost lost me by doing that. And I believed her. I believed her. That if that ghost had chosen at that time to manifest, there was a good chance that I would have never made it back home in one piece. I'd be a ghost myself wandering through the woods and never finding my way back home. And my family would be coming to the bridge mourning me from here on out. I just want to tell a quick ghost story, my encounter with something like that. We also, one things that we used to enjoy going to doing when we were kids, we would go to the family cemeteries right when the sun went down or right when the sun was coming up, when the fog and the mists were coming through the woods. And they would always cover, where everybody was buried at. And we would go there and look. We're never sure if it was the wind or not. But the mist from the fogs, the wind, and not wind, the fog and the mist on the side of the mountain going across the graves. It would always appear flat around the cemetery, but when it crossed the graves, it would spiral. You would see the mist and the fog that would gather around the different piles of stones that marked the graves, and you would see the mist do little dances and little spirals around it, while everything else around it stayed flat. And that would be my granny telling me. She told me the reason why that happened is that the spirits in the morning were going back to bed. And that was them disturbing the fog as they laid back down in their beds, which was their graves. And when it happened at night, when the sun was beginning to set, it was them rising up, waking up out of their beds and rising up from their graves to do whatever they needed to do that day. And that was them that was disturbing the mist and the smoke there. So I grew up believing in the once human spirits of the world and the ghosts of the world. To the mountain folk, they exist. There's absolutely no doubt that there are ghosts. We weren't sure if there was a heaven. We weren't sure if there was a hell, but we were damn sure that there were ghosts that lived on the side of our mountain. Now, let me touch briefly on the non-human and the unhuman spirits, known as the wild spirits of the woods, the elementals of the woods and of the mountains. If you ever get the chance to explore the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, Blue Ridge, of course, any part of the Appalachia, when you go into these forests on the sides of these mountains, on the top of these mountains, it's like being in another world. It's separated. The forests are ancient. You get the feeling that you're just a tiny infant in the middle of all these great ancient trees and spirits and stones there. And in fact, you are. Um, as I was taught and as I came to believe, that these woods are indeed alive. They are a living organism. I'm not talking about, I know a tree is a life form, but I'm talking about on a spiritual level. They are a spiritual creature that, can choose to communicate with you, choose to punish you, choose to reward you, choose to keep you safe, choose to cause great harm to you. And I have to paraphrase Alfred Lord Tennyson at this point when he was talking about nature in general. He said nature was both red in tooth and claw. And people ask me, well, what does that mean? I said, well, think of this. A rose is quite beautiful, but when you pluck it, if you pluck it, the thorns will prick you and you will bleed. So sometimes the most beautiful things in the world can hurt you. And that's true about the mountains and the spirits that dwell within those mountains. They can choose to appear to you as something quite beautiful, or they can choose to harm you when you're there. He's still a good friend. I just haven't spoken to him, in probably almost 9 years. We haven't been in contact. But I consider him the foremost expert in categorizing the Fae. When I say Fae, it's F-A-E. Fairies, which are nature spirits, in the different categories and different types of them, including the She, and that's S-I-D-H-E, but it's pronounced She. And those are the high fairy and the greater spirits that are out there, that hold dominion over the lands and the wild things of nature. And he always wanted me to take him back home to back to where I grew up at in the Appalachia, upon hearing my stories and talking with me, sharing his stories. He wanted to go see if he could see if some of the wilder spirits that existed there were actually part of the race of Fae or She. So I decided to take him there one weekend. We drove up there. He wanted to hear about, and we have something. Okay, you've heard about it on that dumbass fucking show, Mountain Monsters, which I despise it because it makes everybody who's ever grown up in the mountains look like backwards, idiotic, gun-toting hillbillies who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Superstitious hillbillies. That show has done more to disparage a people than anything else out there. And it's set back cryptid and paranormal mountain investigations back 100 years just from its existence. Oh, God, I hate that fucking show. But one thing they're always talking about are, God, I hate even quoting those motherfucking assholes. But I'm saying it because hopefully people have seen maybe episodes of it, have heard it being talked about by these dumbasses. They were always referred to something called smoke wolves, which was a type of spiritual cryptid that would take a form of a great wolf or a dog. And they traveled in packs. They left no footprints, and they were predators in the woods. And you would hear them baying at night, running through the woods and howling at night, looking to steal souls from people. There's actually a more proper name for it, if they ever bothered to actually talk to somebody that actually lived in the Appalachian Mountains and have heard of them. And you guys are going to laugh when I tell you what the name of them are. They're called blue hounds. Not blue ticks, that's a type of dog, a breed of dog that's used to go on raccoon hunting with. I'm talking about blue hounds. Blue hounds were known for chasing away hunters that hunted at night, especially if they were hunting alone at night. They were considered guardians of the forest, that they lived in the forest, but they took the form of a long, thin dog, enormous head, long muzzle, lots of teeth, long, long tail, long, long legs. But the reason why they were called blue hounds is because they had a flickering blue fire, um, a nimbus of blue fire that would appear across their bodies as they ran. Um, and they would leave footprints, um, but they only left footprints on stone. The stones would burn with their footprint. They would leave a burned etching of their foot in stone, marking their passage through that part of the land. And they would always chase out hunters out of the woods, especially if they were going in woods that they didn't belong into, or went into some of the older parts of the woods in which they had no business going there and hunting in the first place. They would be chased out at night, and they would be literally hounded until they left the woods. But they would never overtly try to kill them. But sometimes the dumb people would run off the side of a cliff or fall into a river or a river and a deep creek, and they would drown trying to get away from the blue hounds. And I told the story of the blue hounds to my dearest friend. God, I miss him so much. Miss him. And he surmised that maybe they were perhaps a type of feyhound, uh, which existed in the summer side of the fairy world, and they were used by the Sidhe as guardian animals of the woods. And he surmised that they were probably a type of the feyhound that existed out there, and they would be turned loose to patrol the woods at night by the Sidhe. He spent the next weekend, well, 4 days, including the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, camped out in some of the oldest parts of the woods on the Tennessee side of where I grew up at. And he got some really amazing recordings of howling in the woods, dogs baying, a pack of dogs baying in the woods. And he never saw them, but he heard them, and he recorded the sound, the howling that they made as they came through the woods. Um, and when the sun was coming up, he caught in the far distance, he caught a little glimpse of a flickering blue flame, and he thought it was them. And he thought it was them, these blue hounds, these fey hounds in the woods. Um, um, and I think they left him alone, and left me alone too, for in that fact, um, because he wasn't there to hunt. For in that fact, um, because he wasn't there to hunt, he was just there to observe. But they kept an eye on him for those 4 days until we left without incident. Well, guys, it looks like the magic time has arrived yet again, where we'll have to call it a night. I know it was a bit rambling. I'm probably going to do a part 2 of mountain spirits and mountain legends, and just a part 2, part 3, part 4. Because people are very interested in some of the stories that actually come out of the mountains that haven't been Hollywoodized. Um, so, keep your eye out for that. Hopefully, I'll be doing them soon. Um, but as always, I appreciate you all coming on tonight. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button. If you want to, feel free to subscribe. I am on Twitter. You can also Google me at Mike the Naked Bigfoot, or go on Twitter and search for Mike the Naked Bigfoot. But you can find me at Voodoo3 on Twitter and follow me and stay informed of various and sundry paranormal happenings, plus the occasional bad joke or something that makes you laugh on Twitter. I do appreciate everybody who watches. Please feel free to leave a comment, constructive criticism if you want to as well. I do take criticism to heart. I do try to improve the show based on the criticism that I receive. You will not offend. And as always, love you, appreciate you. And until the next time, have a fantastic night, everyone.